Be'ezus Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Zevachim Daf Tzadik Beis, number 92. And we'll just discuss over here. We're going to start from about 10 lines from the bottom of Daf Tzadik Aleph Amid Beis. And basically, what the Gemara is discussing, uh, 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 the idea that was said in the Mishnah, maybe we didn't get a chance to do the Mishnah yesterday, but the Mishnah said an idea that we're all familiar with. You can donate a carbon, right? You could donate an animal to the Beis Hamikdash, and you could donate a mincha. What happens if somebody wants to donate just oil for the Beis Hamikdash? So the Mishnah says, Rab Shimon said no, and Rab Tarfon said yes, misnadvin shemen, as you can see. You could just make a donation of oil. Now, if you just donate wine, everybody agrees you could just donate. Hi, Sheldon, we just began.
Okay, thank you.
So we're discussing whether somebody could just donate oil to the Beis Hamikdash. You could donate an animal, you could donate a mincha, which is a flour offering mixed with oil. Um, you can donate just wine. Just wine. If you donate just wine, then you're gonna you go up to the mizbeach, I guess, and you just pour it down the drain, which is the safsel, as you can see on the mizbeach. What happens? Somebody who wants to just donate oil. So the commissioner said that that a misnadvin shemen. According to Reb Shimon, you can't. Reb Tarfon says misnadvin shemen. You could donate just oil alone. And what do you do with the oil? I mean, how do you offer it to Hashem? So Shmuel says on Amin Beis, according to Rab Tarfon, Hamasnadev Shemen, when you donate oil, kainza, you take off a little piece of it, like you take a drop of the oil into a little mini cup, like a schnapps gläsel, and you throw that onto the fire. Ushiyarav me'acholin, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the kahanim. Rabbi Zera disagreed. He said uh, uh, we learned that Abaya disagreed, I think, that with the oil, it's just you throw the whole thing on the fire. But basically, it goes on the fire. You donate oil, you dump it onto the fire. Now we go to the bottom of the page of Tzadik Aleph Amid Beis, 10 lines from the bottom. And Amar Shmuel says, what do you do with wine? If someone who donates wine, right? A guy who donates wine, a very nice person, but what do you do with the wine? And the Torah says you can donate wine. Shmuel says, misnadev yain, if you donate wine, maybe umazalfa yagaba ishim. Wrong. What you do is you put it and splash it over the fire, on top of the fire. My tama, what's the pasuk? Amakra, the pasuk says, v'yayin tatrich v'nesech chatzi ahin, ishe reich nichayich lashem. So there's a concept that wine that's part of a carbon, where you do nesachim, right? So that kind of wine you pour down the drain. However, if you're donating wine alone, ishe, it goes onto the fire. So if you take the wine and pour it on the fire, but the Gemara has a problem with that. What's the question? The question is, but you're putting out the fire, and the Torah tells you, which we say before you start davening, that you're not allowed to extinguish the fire on top of the mizbeach. So if you're going to pour wine on top of the mizbeach, you're extinguishing the fire. And says the Gemara, you're not really extinguishing the fire. Kibu b'mitzas lo shmei kiboy. If you extinguish the fire just a little bit, that's not considered extinguishing the fire. Oh, is that true? Is that true? Extinguishing the fire is not a problem. Hi, Steve, we just began, and the Gemara taught us that if you donate just wine, if your person donates just wine, you take the wine and you pour it on the mizbeach. You pour it on top of the fire of the mizbeach. So the Gemara says, wait a second, but aren't you extinguishing the fire of the mizbeach? The answer is, if you do it a little bit, that's not a problem. Says the Gemara, Eini, that's not true. If you take just one coal off the mizbeach, one coal, a burning coal off the mizbeach, the chiba, and you extinguish it, chayiv. You get an avera of loy sichbeh. So pouring wine on top of the mizbeach just because you donated wine, you're extinguishing a little bit of the fire. And says the Gemara, Deleke Elahai. That brisa that says if you take off one coal on top of the Mizbeach and extinguish it, that's talking about on the Mizbeach that only had one coal. There was just one coal, one piece of coal on the Mizbeach. So when you extinguish that coal, there is no more fire. Only then are you going to be liable. But if you're not really extinguishing it, you just, you make a little extinguish, that's not a problem. Here the Gemara answers another answer. Kibu de mitzvah shani. But there's a mitzvah. The mitzvah is ishe rech nechoich. You pour the wine on top of the fire. And there's an avera of loy sichba. Do not extinguish the fire on the mizbeach. We know a klal, eisei doicha loisa, say that a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment. That's the answer. Tashma, come in here. The Tana Rab Lazar ben Yaakov, Klape Shnosa Torah Litroim, Yochel Yechabe V'Yitroim. The Torah gives you an idea of Truma Sadeshin, which we've seen that mitzvah to take some of the ashes of the Mizbeach every morning and take a little piece of it and put it on the side of the ramp. I would think, now that you have a mitzvah, you should extinguish if you don't find any ashes, just extinguish the fire and make ashes and make the Truma Sadeshin. Amarta, but there's an avera lo yichaba. You're not allowed to extinguish. So, but there's a mitzvah to do truma sadeshin. So why don't we say that the mitzvah of truma sadeshin overrides the avera of not to extinguish? And says the Gemara, Shani Hasam over there is different. The Yasef and Otter. You don't have to do truma sadeshin at 2 a.m. You can wait a little bit, and it's gonna come to ashes. So if you could do the mitzvah without overriding the avera of loy sichba, so you wait, let it wait. So we'll tell you to wait and don't extinguish the fire. Okay, so Shmuel said, what do you do with the wine? If someone wants to donate just wine to the Beis Hamikdash, what they do with it is they pour it onto the fire. So the Gemara asks the question, Tashma, come in here, Yayin Kedivri Rabbi Kiva Lesfalim. According to Rabbi Kiva, the Brisa says if you donate wine, you put it down the drains on the mizbeach. You see the sefalim where it says chafalaf over here, right over here. This is where you pour it down, and then shemen. If you're donating oil, only Tarfim says if you're donating oil, you could put that on the fire. That's not extinguishing fire. You're pouring wine. If you're donating just wine, you put it down the drain. You're not supposed to extinguish. So there's clear brises that say that if you're just donating wine, what should you do with it? Pour it down the drain of the mizbeah. So how could Shmuel say that you could pour it on the fire? Answers the Gemara, like Kasha Harab Yehuda Reb Shimon. Reb Shmuel will line himself according to Reb Shimon. Reb Yehuda says that if you by accident extinguish the fire on the mizbeach, it's a davar she'ein miskaven. That's not your intention. You get an avera. Reb Shimon holds in Hilchas Shabbos davar she'ein miskaven. If that's not your intention, and it's not certain that it's going to happen, but that's not your intention, so then you don't get an avera. So when a person donates wine and pours it onto the fire, his intention is not that the fire should get extinguished. If he pours it drop by drop, it's not going to get extinguished at all. So it's not like a definite thing that's going to happen, so you don't get an avera. And Shmuel will go according to Rab Shimon. So Gemara says, remember the Shmuel Rab Shimon. So we relate, are you going to tell me that Shmuel holds like Rab Shimon? Well, Shmuel says, Mechabin gacheles shel matchis b'reshus harabim b'shvil shelo yizoyki b'rabim. That Shmuel says that they extinguish a person is allowed to extinguish a coal of like a hot piece of metal on Shabbos that's in the Reshus Harabim. Let's say there's a hot piece of metal in the Reshus Harabim, and people are going to get burnt. So a person on Shabbos is allowed to cool off that piece of metal so that nobody should get hurt himself on that, because extinguishing metal is only a darabana. We go to Amid Aleph. Tzadid Bezim Abrav. Aval gacheles loy gacheles shel eitz. Don't extinguish a piece of coal that's made of wood on Shabbos, because that's extinguishing midaraisa. Now, when you extinguish something, that's called, it's not a dova she'eina miskaven, that's called a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. Because when you're extinguishing, let's say if someone closes the light on Shabbos, it's not that he wants, blows out the fire on Shabbos. It's not that he wants ashes. He just doesn't want light here. That's not the Aveira extinguishing. The extinguishing malacha in the Mishkan was you extinguished it so that you can make ashes. They needed ashes for a certain building of the Beis Hamikdash, building of the Mishkan. So the Gemara said, "V'isal kadaitis Rab Shimon tzvirus, if he held like Rab Shimon, afil gachel shel eitz nami." Rab Shimon is of the opinion that malacha she'eina tzricha legufa, if you don't need the malacha for the purpose that it was done for, then you're not getting an avera. So if Shmuel always aligned himself with Rab Shimon, then he should allow that if you find a coal from wood in the Rishus Harabim, you should be allowed to extinguish it. And says the Gemara, not necessarily true. But dava she'eina miskaven, when it comes to dava she'eina miskaven, if you shava like Rab Shimon, on that he holds like Rab Shimon that it's permitted. But malacha she'eina tzricha legufa, when it comes to malacha not for its purpose, shava like Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. So that's the point. Why did Shmuel allow a person to, when he donates wine on the mizbeach, he should put it on the fire? Because Shmuel holds like Rab Shimon by dava she'eina miskaven. If your intention is not to extinguish the fire, and you're doing it drop by drop, you're dropping the wine slowly onto the fire. So then you're dropping the wine slowly onto the fire. I'm sorry, you're putting it over here. So then that's not considered an avera. Amar Rav Huna said, the wine, let's say that you donated, became tamei. So then you can't bring it onto the mizbeach. So they make a separate arrangement of fire in the Beis Hamikdash, v'sarfim, but not on the mizbeach, of course, because it's like psulei mikdashim, something that became disqualified from bringing on the mizbeach. You make a little side fire and you burn it. Because the pasuk says, when something becomes disqualified, you don't just throw it in the garbage, you burn it in the Beis Hamikdash. Tanya Rame Hachi, same brisa. Hadam ba'Hashem v'amenachas v'neschal b'nishmitmuhu, blood, oil, and the flour and the nesachim that became tamei. So what do you do with them? You don't throw it in the garbage. You make a separate fire in the Beis Hamikdash on the floor. V'sarfin, you burn it there. Amar Shmuel Rav Chanan Bagdasa. Shmuel said to Rav Chanan of Baghdad, I want you to gather 10 people, because I want to publicize this new halacha. And I want to say to them, the sacham shemitmu, liquids that became tamei, the dam, the blood, oil, you make a separate arrangement of fire, and you burn it, and that's the end of that. Hadron Allah Kol HaTadir. So we just finished the 9th perek, and now we begin Be'ezus Hashem, the 10th perek of Masechta Zevachim. Now, the 10th perek we're discussing over here a fascinating mitzvah which you're not even aware of. There's a mitzvah essay in the Torah to do laundry. Where is the mitzvah essay? The mitzvah essay is by if the blood of a chatas that gets accidentally sprinkled onto the clothing of the kohen, so then there's a mitzvah's assay in the Torah to wash their clothing. And not only that, you have 7 ingredients, 7 types of detergents that they use to wash it well. So Chazal knew how to get a stain out of a piece of clothing, especially an expensive piece of clothing like the Big Day Kahuna. So they were experts on that. And that's this mitzvah. There's a mitzvah in the Torah. Where does it say in the Torah to wash your clothing? So I'm just quoting you in Parshas Tzav, where it talks about the mitzvah of how to eat the korban chatas. eat it in the kodesh ketzashim, b'chatzar oil moed, sheb'mokom kodesh te'ocha b'chatzar oil moed. And then the Torah says, if the blood of the chatas, vasher yiza midoma al habeged, I should really highlight this, if the blood of the chatas goes on to one of the clothing, techabes, you have to launder it, b'mokom kodesh, in the Beis Hamikdash. I don't think it has to be done by a kohen. Anybody could launder it, but it has to be done in the Beis Hamikdash. So now, by the way, there's one other mitzvah of washing clothing, which appears by nega. But other than that, there is no mitzvah to wash clothing. So now we begin the Mishnah. Dam chatas, the blood of a korban chatas, shenitas al habeged, that got onto the beged kuna, and beged kuna is soft. Harezat ton kibus. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to wash it. Even though it's only by a korban chatas. Now we know there's three types of korban chatas. There's a chatas on the chitzon that goes on the outside mizbeach. There's a chatas pnimi, which is totally not eaten, but it's sprinkled. The blood is sprinkled inside the sanctuary, and then there's the bird of a korban chatas. So the Torah is speaking by the way the Mishnah is read. The Torah was speaking by chatas chitzon. Shenema b'mokoim kodesh te'ochel, because the Torah was speaking by a chatas chitzoni, where you eat the meat. But you should know echad hanacholos ve'echad pnimius, whether it's an outside korban chatas that's eaten or an inside korban chatas, tu'unin kinis, it needs to be washed. Shenema, because the pasuk says Torah's chatas, Torah achas l'chol chatas. Every chatas, the blood, only by a korban chatas, by the way, that gets sprinkled onto the beged, it has to be washed. But chatas pesula, but let's say the chatas became disqualified, and then that blood spilled on your beged, ain't done a ton of kubis. Then you don't have a mitzvah to wash it. Whether this korban chatas had a minute that it was kosher or not, that blood, once it becomes disqualified blood and it ends up on the clothing of a kohen, he does not have a mitzvah to wash it. What does it mean, a korban chatas that was momentarily good? It means shalona you shechted a korban chatas, but you didn't sprinkle the blood on time, or the blood got tameh, or it went out of the Beis Hamikdash. But at one period, at 10 minutes, this blood was kosher. So therefore, but later it became disqualified. But sometimes you shecht the korban chatas, as soon as you shecht it, it was never qualified. If you think about a bad thought while you're shechting the korban chatas, so it was disqualified as soon as you slaughtered it. Or shekiblu psulun esdamo. Let's say right after the shechita is kosher with anybody, but a kohen, let's say, who's puzzle, who's, let's say, an avel, caught the blood, so the korban chatas is puzzle. So I don't care when it became puzzle, if it became puzzle right away or it became puzzle an hour after you shechted it. If that blood falls on the beged of the kohen, there's no mitzvah to wash it. Okay, now, dama chatas, v'itaris chatas, the Gemara says, if you're darshaning from a pasuk, afil chatas or oif nami. So why don't we make it that if you shecht a bird, and the bird blood falls on the beged of the kohen, you should also have a mitzvah to wash it. Allah matanya, and this is the key. Why do we have a brisa that says, Yochel tehedam chatas oif ton kibuz? I would think that the blood of a bird chatas, if that gets onto your clothing, you have to wash it. There's a mitzvah to wash it. Talmud Bavli Zois, only an animal, but not a bird. But the Torah, you're going to see like this. Let's look at the psukim. There's a pasuk that says Zois, which limits it, only this. And Torah's chatas means every chatas needs to be washed. So what we're saying basically is that an animal chatas, whether you bring the blood on the inside or the outside mizbeach, if that blood needs to be washed off your clothing. A bird is exempt. Zois, it's exempt. It's exempt from you don't have a wash. So if the bird blood comes onto your clothing, you don't have to wash it. Amr Shlokish Bakapara Amakra Tishachet Binishchotes HaKodesh B'daba. You can see that Pasuk is talking about slaughtered, not by a bird, because the birds were you did belika, you didn't slaughter them. So ve'ema b'necholas HaKodesh B'daba. Then maybe it's only Pasuk is only talking about chatas that you eat. Maybe the parsha is not talking about a chatas pnimi where no part of it is eaten. Rabbi Rachmana Tairas. So we have Tairas. So you have Tairas to include that even a chatas pnimi's blood needs to be washed. If that's the case, afil chatas nami. Then chatas a bird blood should also be included in the word Tairas to include that you need to wash it if it gets onto your clothing. So the Gemara says, be it Rachmana Zois, but there's a limit. There's a limit called Zois that says not all chatas is you need to wash your clothing. So the Gemara says, Amara Isa. So what's your logic over here? Why do you marba a chatas pnimi and exclude the chatas of the bird? Answers the Gemara, Mistavra, the chatas pnimi savalei rabuye. I include a chatas pnimi shekain because behemoth's an animal. Shchitas tzafan, you shecht it in the north. The kabbalas kli, and you collect it in a vessel. You collect the blood in a vessel. The karen, we go to Amid Beis. The karen, you put it on the corners of the mizbeach. The etzba, you use your finger. The chuda, you have to get it on the sharp part of the corner. The ishim, and some of the parts of the animal go on the main fire. So really, a chatas panimi is very similar to a chatas chitzoni. And if the Torah says a chatas chitzoni, you wash the blood, so I'll include also by the riboy to include also a chatas panimi and exclude a bird, which a bird doesn't have all that similarities to a chatas chitzona because you don't slaughter it. And you don't catch the blood. As you remember, you stick your nail in the back of the bird, and you put it you rub it against the wall, and none of it you don't go onto the fire. None of the bird gets eaten by the fire. It's eaten by the kahanim. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, chatas oif havelei rabui. Let's include chatas oif shekain chutz kamoisa, but chatas oif is brought on the outside mizbeach, as opposed to a chatas panimi, which is brought on the inside of his bear. V'achila kamoisa, and it's also eaten. Chatas panimi is not eaten at all. Answers the Gemara, Hanach nefisha. There's more similarities from a chatas panimi to a chatas chitzoni than a chatas oiv to a chatas chitzoni. So I'm only marba a chatas panimi and not a chatas chitzoni. Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef said, Omar Kra, the pasuk says, Yechlena Zu v'lo yacheres. So benecheles miat hakosev. The Torah says that only one type of chatas that's eaten, you wash the blood, but not the other type. And the other type is to exclude the chatas ha'oif. Well, zois lomali. If you have another miat that's mamayit a bird chatas, what do you need zois? Eat lav zois have a mina yechlenu urcha de krok. I would think that Yechlena is not a miyat because that's the way the Torah talks about in the singular term, because the Torah uses those kind of words. So that's why Kamash Balan that Yechlena is a miyat. So basically, Rav Yosef says there's another a miyut in the pasuk that tells you that a chatas of a bird is excluded from this mitzvah of washing the clothing. So till now we have learned that the pasuk, these psukim over here that we discussed, is talking about where it says to wash the clothing was initially talking about a chatas chitzoni, and chatas pnimi we marba and chatas oif we exclude. Rav Yosef has another concept. Rabbi has another way to look at it. Rabbi says Omakra. The Torah is only speaking to you about a chatas penimi, and not by a chatas chitzoni, because and therefore you're marba chatas chitzoni, and you're excluding a chatas oif which is not sprinkled. You see, the Torah says on the sprinkled blood you wash your clothing, But a chatas oif is not sprinkled. If you remember, you pluck the head off with a malika and then you just rub it. It's not sprinkled like in a cup where you sprinkle it, like a chatas of an animal. Says the Gemara, what's now? We learned in the Mishnah, Afa Pisha Nikosim Dabe El Benachonis, linear. So, the Bryce's the Mishnah says that the whole parsha is talking about a chatas chitzoni. Answers the Gemara, you're right. Le'inya Marika Shtifa, parts of the parsha is talking about a chatas chitzoni. Ava le'inya kibos ashiyizaksev. When it comes to washing the clothing, in that part, that parsha is talking about a chatas panimi. So basically, this parsha is talking about a chatas panimi. How are you going to know a chatas chitzoni? From Tairas. And Zois will exclude the chatas ha'oif. So that's, and therefore, so the Gemara says, Ihachi echad ha'necholis ve'echad panimis, echad ha'panimis ve'echad necholis. So if that's the case, the Brayshus should say that the pasuk is talking about a chatas panimi and then talking about a chatas chitzoni. Answers the Gemara to know you have to fix the braysa. Echad ha'panimis ve'echad ha'necholis. Another minute here. So now, Ihachi chatas oif nami. Let us include a chatas oif. Answers the Gemara, Mir Rachman Zois. The Torah says Zois, only a chatas panimi, and not a chatas chitzoni, and not a chatas oif. So the Gemara says, Ihachi chitzona nami loy. Don't include chitzona. Riba Rachman Torahs. So now you have Torahs is marba including a chatas chitzon. Zois is excluding a chatas a bird. Omara Isa, Mistavra. It makes more sense. Chatas Pesema Havale Rabu Shekain, same idea. A chatas chitzoni is more similar to a chatas pnimi because it's an animal. Shchitas tzafan, you select it in the north, the Kabbalah's kli, the Karen, the Etzba, the Chuda, the Ishin. It has a lot of similarities, a chatas pnimi to a chatas chitzoni. The Rabba, chatas oif is very similar to a chatas pnimi. Havale Rabuya, Shekain Azor Kamaisi, because a chatas oif has sprinkling like similar to a chatas panimi. I mean, it's sprinkled. It's sprinkled because the chatas panimi was sprinkled actually on the pareiches. And says the Gemara Hanach Nefishin. It's very similar. It's more chatas panimi is more similar to a chatas chitzoni than to a chatas oif. So the bottom line is, we'll stop here. But the bottom line of the whole Gemara over here is that the Gemara established that there is a mitzvah in the Torah that if blood of a chatas gets on your clothing, there's a mitzvah that you have to wash it. You have to wash it in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, it refers to a chatas pnimi and a chatas chitzoni, but not a chatas of birds. Bird blood that gets onto your clothing, there's no mitzvah to wash it off. And the Gemara discussed different ways how to read the psukim to include a chatas animal and exclude a chatas of a bird. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.